Hey everyone, buckle up,
Oh,
because today we're diving headfirst into something absolutely wild.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Saudi Arabia's Neom project.
Yeah, the futuristic megacity supposedly rising right out of the desert sands.
Trying to figure out if this thing is the next leap for humanity or just like a mirage.
A shimmering mirage in the heat.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a question a lot of people have, and the answer is not so simple.
I bet. Just looking at some of the stuff about Neom,
Mm.
it's wild. Robot dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah, I've seen those.
Beaches that glow at night.
Glowing beaches, right.
An artificial moon, are you kidding me?
It really does feel like some kind of sci-fi movie.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember that Neom, beyond the headlines, is actually a very complicated project.
Oh, for sure.
There are several different components to it.
Okay.
So you've got the line, which is, well, they say it's a linear city.
Okay.
It's meant to house millions of people, but it's in the structure that's only 200 meters wide.
Wow.
And then there's Oxagon, which is, it's a floating industrial hub.
Including what?
It's this huge, massive floating industrial hub. And they say it's supposed to be this model for sustainable manufacturing.
Okay.
And then, of course, you can't forget Trojena,
For Gino.
which is, well, it's a mountain resort
Yeah.
up in the mountains. And they want it to offer year-round skiing, which is crazy because it's in the desert.
That's what I was thinking. Year-round skiing in the desert.
It's known for the heat.
Yeah, it's a desert. It's like always hot. I mean, how
It's hard to even imagine the scale of all this, you know?
it really is. It's like a city in a straight line through the desert and this giant floating industrial complex.
Yeah. Bigger than a lot of cities, actually.
Seriously. It's hard to believe, honestly.
And that's where the skepticism comes in, I think.
Right.
Because there's this recent Bloomberg report.
Okay, Bloomberg, yeah.
They were talking about how they had to downsize a lot of the line's goals for 2030.
What do you mean by downsize? Like,
So they were initially projecting something like 2.5 million residents by 2030.
okay, a lot of people.
But now those numbers are way down,
Like, how far down are we talking?
down to about 300,000.
Wow, that's a huge difference.
Yeah, it is. And that 170-kilometer long city,
Oh, wow.
it might only end up being about a mile and a half long by 2030.
A mile and a half. For real.
That's what they're saying.
Huh. Well, that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But I have seen, like, official statements, from Saudi Arabia, and they insist that Neom is, like, full steam ahead,
Right.
and that it's going to deliver something unprecedented.
Yeah, I've seen those too.
So are they just trying to, like, save face, or what?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? The million, maybe $1 trillion question.
Yeah.
I mean, to understand their perspective, I think we have to look at why Saudi Arabia is putting so much money into this.
Okay, that's true. It does seem pretty risky at this point.
Right. Their economy relies so heavily on oil, but, demand for that is going down as we transition to renewables.
Yeah, definitely.
So NEOM, for them, it's a big part of their Vision 2030 program.
Vision 2030, okay.
It's their plan to diversify the economy and become a global leader in technology, tourism, and sustainability.
Okay, so it's not just about building some cool futuristic city, it's about securing their economic future.
Yeah, that's a big part of it.
Interesting, that makes sense.
Hmm.
But I can't help but wonder, is all this coming at a cost?
What do you mean?
I've read some stuff about the Huatat tribe, the people who have lived in the region for generations being displaced.
Right. You're bringing up a really important point.
Yeah,
One that often gets overshadowed by all the promises of technology.
the human cost, right?
Exactly. And the forced evictions of the Huatat tribe, it's definitely raising a lot of ethical concerns.
For sure.
There are reports from Amnesty International, the UN, about harassment.
Oh, wow.
Arrests, even killings of people who resisted being moved. Their land is being taken to build this city.
That's awful.
Yeah, it is.
It's just heartbreaking to think about what that's doing to their lives.
Yeah.
Their culture, their history. Makes you wonder if all this progress, even the most innovative stuff, is worth sacrificing basic human rights.
It's a really tough question, and it's something we have to think about as we go deeper into this whole story.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the ethical concerns. It seems like there are some financial hurdles, too.
Right.
Didn't Bloomberg also mention something about Saudi Arabia's public investment fund?
The PIF, yeah.
Like they're having cash flow issues or something?
Yeah, the PIF, that's basically Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, and it's been the main source of money for NEOM.
Okay.
But it's getting depleted because this project is so huge and they're investing in other things too.
Makes sense.
And getting outside investors has been tough, especially with all the reports of, cost overruns and missed deadlines.
Right.
It doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
So they're being criticized for human rights violations. They're running into money troubles.
Yeah.
This is starting to sound less like a utopia and more like a potential disaster waiting to happen.
It's definitely a complicated picture.
What about the people actually working on this project? What's it like for them?
Well, that's where things take another kind of dark turn.
Oh, cool.
The Wall Street Journal has some reports about what it's like to work at Neom.
Okay.
And former executives have described the CEO, Nadmi al-Nasser, as a slave driver.
Wow, a slave driver.
Apparently, yeah.
That's intense.
Yeah, and that kind of reputation doesn't exactly attract and keep top talent, which you really need for a project this big.
I can imagine. So it seems like the pressure to deliver on this massive vision is creating this crazy, unsustainable work culture.
It seems that way, yeah.
But even with all these challenges, some people must be buying into Neom's promises, right?
Oh, sure.
I mean, their promotional videos are slick.
Oh, yeah, they're very well done.
And they paint this very enticing picture of the future.
There's definitely an allure to it.
Like this futuristic city with all the latest technology, a luxurious lifestyle, sustainability. It's attractive, especially for people who want to escape the problems of our current cities.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially maybe for the super rich who like the idea of tax havens and fewer regulations.
Right.
But I can't help but think there must be downsides to that kind of controlled environment.
What do you mean?
Makes me think about surveillance, data collection.
Yeah, I see your point.
Especially given Saudi Arabia's track record on human rights. A city where your every move is tracked and analyzed doesn't exactly sound like freedom and privacy to me.
You're right. That is a valid concern.
Yeah.
The possibility of intrusive surveillance tech in a city as advanced as Neom, it's a big one.
Yeah.
And with Saudi Arabia's history. Yeah, it definitely raises questions about how it could be misused.
Definitely. And it seems like people are starting to notice these contradictions.
How so?
Well, look at what happened with that whole Riot Games partnership.
Oh, for the League of Legends European Championship.
Right.
Yeah, what about it?
The backlash from the gaming community was so huge that they had to back out of the deal.
Right.
I mean, that shows that people are paying attention and they're not afraid to speak up.
Oh, for sure. And it really highlights the risks Neom is facing, in terms of its reputation.
Absolutely.
As they try to gain a global standing, it's a big deal.
Yeah. So where do we go from here? We have Saudi Arabia claiming success, but we also have all this evidence of problems.
Right.
Is Neom on the verge of collapsing, or do they have a plan to save this thing?
That's a good question, and that's exactly what we're going to explore next. The future of Neom is hanging in the balance.
Yeah, and whatever happens, it's going to have huge consequences.
You got it.
So we've talked about all the problems facing Neom, like the ethical issues, the money problems, that tough work environment, and people just not really believing in it anymore.
It's a lot to overcome.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
It's hard to see how they can get past all this and still make their vision a reality. What do you think could happen next?
Honestly, it feels a little like watching someone on a tightrope, but without a safety net.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
There are two main paths I see for Neom.
Okay, what are they?
One, Saudi Arabia figures out how to dig themselves out of this hole. Maybe they get a ton of money from somewhere new or use some of the stuff they already have in the PIF.
That's interesting. What kind of stuff are we talking about?
Well, the PIF, remember, it's like their piggy bank. Yeah. They've got a lot invested in big companies like Boeing.
Oh, yeah, Boeing, right.
Disney, Uber, a bunch of others.
Okay.
So they could sell some of that off if they really needed to get cash for Neom.
That's a pretty drastic move, though.
It would be. But if they're desperate to save this project, it might be their only option.
Wow. Okay. And what about that other path you mentioned?
The other path, and I think this one's more likely, is that Neom just fails.
Fails, completely.
Yeah, a total failure. Imagine it, a half-built futuristic city just sitting there in the desert.
Abandoned.
Yeah, abandoned, like a monument to how they tried to do too much.
Oof, that's kind of sad.
It would be. And the consequences wouldn't just be about the money they lost.
Oh, right.
Think about the damage to Saudi Arabia's reputation.
Oh, yeah.
It would make people question if they could actually achieve any of their Vision 2030 goals.
I can see that.
And it would be so much harder to get foreign investors in the future.
Like no one would trust them.
Basically, yeah. It would be a major blow to their credibility on the world stage.
It's ironic, right? This project was supposed to show everyone how modern and forward-thinking they are.
It really is.
but it could actually end up holding them back.
It just goes to show sometimes putting all your eggs in one basket isn't the best strategy.
Definitely not.
Mm.
But beyond all that, what about the people?
The people.
The workers, the people who were forced to move, everyone who was hoping for a better future because of Neom?
Oh, yeah. If Neom failed, it would be devastating for them.
Like, what would happen to them?
Well, all those construction workers would lose their jobs.
Right.
And the supposed economic benefits for the region would disappear.
Poof, and gone.
The Huaytat tribe, they've already been forced from their homes, and they probably wouldn't be able to go back.
It's really unfair to them.
And anyone who bought into the idea of Neom as this utopian city, they'd be left with nothing but disappointment.
It's a tough reality to face. It reminds us that for all the fancy designs and big promises, there are real people whose lives are affected by all of this.
Absolutely. Real people with real hopes and dreams.
It makes you think, what is progress really about?
Yeah, is it just about new technology and a bigger economy?
Or is there more to it than that?
Shouldn't we also be thinking about things like social justice?
Taking care of the environment.
Making sure we respect human rights.
Yeah, it seems like we've kind of lost sight of that with Neom.
It does make you wonder.
With all the negative stuff we've talked about, I keep thinking back to that Johnny Harris video. He talks about how warm and welcoming the Saudi people were.
I remember that.
Like, it felt like they genuinely wanted to connect with the world, to show people a different side of their country.
Yeah, it felt sincere.
Could Neom, even with all its problems, be part of that?
I think it's possible. I mean, there are definitely people in Saudi Arabia who truly believe in Neom.
Yeah.
They think it can change their country for the better and make a positive impact on the world.
Makes sense.
And it's important to remember that wanting progress and modernization isn't a bad thing.
It's natural, right?
Absolutely. The challenge is doing it the right way.
So being mindful of the ethical implications.
Right. And the social and environmental consequences of something this big, it's all about finding that balance.
And it seems like they haven't quite found that balance yet.
Not from what we've seen, no. But even if Neom fails to be this utopia they've envisioned, could there still be valuable lessons to learn from it?
Like, what could we take away from this whole experiment?
I think there are a lot of potential lessons. Neom is a real-world test case for new technologies, for how we plan cities, for how we can live more sustainably.
Kind of like a giant experiment.
Exactly. The world is watching to see what works, what doesn't, and what we can apply to future projects.
So even if Neom fails, it could still help us build better cities in the future.
That's the hope, at least.
It's fascinating to think about, like, Neom is this giant lab for the future of urban living, and we're all observing the results.
And the outcome is still up in the air, but the implications, whatever they are, will be massive.
Yeah, no doubt about that. It's amazing how Neom has people talking all over the world.
It really has.
There's this mix of, like, awe and skepticism and even a little bit of fear, I think.
Yeah, it's like it's tapping into all our hopes and anxieties about the future.
Exactly. It's like what's that thing called?
A Rorschach test.
Yes, like a Rorschach test for how we feel about the future.
I like that. That's a good way to put it. Leo, it's a reflection of our desires for better tech.
Yeah.
For living more sustainably.
Right.
Maybe even a little bit of that utopian dream.
Oh, yeah, for sure. But it also shows our worries,
What kind of worries?
like about climate change, inequality, technology getting out of control.
You're right. It's like Neom is this tiny little model of all the biggest challenges and contradictions we're facing right now.
It really is. So does that mean Neom is actually a blueprint for a better future? Or is it more like a warning sign?
A warning sign.
Yeah, like, are we headed down the wrong path, pursuing progress no matter the cost?
That's the big question, isn't it? And we've been trying to figure that out this whole time.
Yeah, it's tough. But even if there aren't any easy answers, I think we've learned some important things from looking at Neom.
I agree. So what are the biggest takeaways for you?
Well, for one thing, I think it shows how important it is to be both ambitious and realistic.
I like that. Dream big, but keep your feet on the ground.
Exactly. Yeah. It's great to push the limits, but you also have to understand, like, the practical side of things.
The money, the time, how people feel about it.
Right. And I think Neom's struggles with all of that are a good lesson for everyone.
For sure. Don't get ahead of yourself.
Yeah. What else? What other lessons did you pick up?
I think another big one is the need for transparency and accountability, especially for huge projects like this.
Transparency. Yeah.
Yeah, being open and honest about what's going on and being held responsible for your actions.
Makes sense, especially with all this stuff about the Huaytat tribe being displaced.
Right. And those reports of the toxic work environment,
Yeah.
it shows how crucial it is to think about ethics and human rights.
It's not just about the technology or the buildings, it's about the people.
Exactly. If you ignore those things, the whole project falls apart and nobody trusts you anymore.
It's like building a house on a shaky foundation.
It won't last.
Mm.
And it's not just for ethical reasons. It's also about making sure the project can actually succeed in the long run.
Sustainability. Right.
Exactly. You need a solid base to build on. And finally, I think Neom reminds us that technology is just a tool. It's not the solution to everything.
I see what you mean.
Neom is all about using the latest technology. But it's important to remember that technology alone can't solve all the complicated problems we're facing.
Like climate change, poverty, injustice.
Exactly. We need a more comprehensive approach.
One that considers the social, economic, and environmental aspects too.
Right. It's not just about the gadgets and gizmos. It's about how we use them to create a better future for everyone.
It's about being smart and responsible with our advancements.
Exactly. And that's why Neom is so interesting, even if we don't know how it's going to turn out.
Yeah, it's a real-life experiment playing out right in front of us.
It's pushing us to ask the tough questions
Mhm.
about what we value, what's ethical, and what true progress really means in the 21st century.
It's a lot to think about.
It's okay.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to ponder. What does Neom's story tell you about what we want for the future? And what are we afraid of?
That's a great question.
What can we learn from both its successes and its failures?
Right. What can we learn?
And most importantly, what kind of world do we want to build?
Yeah.
How can we use technology and innovation to make a world that's both sustainable and fair for everyone?
Those are questions we all need to be thinking about as the world keeps changing around us.
Neom, with all its ups and downs, shows us that the future isn't just something that happens.
It's something we create.
It's a call to action. It's time to really think about the kind of world we want to live in and what role we each play in making that happen.
So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep working towards a better future. We can do this together.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Neom. Until next time, keep exploring.